get into July, this full moon illuminates something. It begins to shed light on things that have been hidden, things that are ready to be exposed. Not so that we are paralyzed in fear or continue to live in a demoralized state, restricted, suppressed, living off scarce resources, feeling unsupported by the world, by the systems, by society. It's meant to lead us into a chapter of this year energetically where collective themes begin to heighten. And the exposing that occurs, that begins to occur around this full moon and proceeding into the month of July, is the type of exposing that leads to greater movements in society, greater movements of awakening, action, creation, dissolving, and the expansion of new movements, new activism, new changes in society. But that starts with friction. That starts with tension. That starts with things that get exposed that aren't working, that are possibly threatening to our safety, threatening to our resources, threatening to our planet's health, threatening to our privacy. This is a full moon that can be collectively sobering. It can be something that gives us all a bit of a reality check. So I just wanted to put it out there that July can be a month where we start to see more waves of enlightenment on Earth, more waves of awakening. And often in those waves, there could be waves of fear, waves of shadow work, waves of purging that allow us to come and bring in more consciousness, that allow us to embody and take more action, that give us a lot of opportunity to create and change and expand in ways that we haven't done before. Now, this is the type of energy that doesn't just happen in one day. It doesn't just happen in one month. It's starting in July. It is happening in July, but this is the type of activation that's occurring in July that could have impact on our society for years to come. So this is historical, what's occurring right now. There are very rare things happening in the skies astrologically in the month of July, and this full moon in Capricorn kind of starts to get us starts to kind of turn the page. We start to see a new chapter forming. And it may begin with something that feels a little bit heavy, sobering, maturing, um, something that grounds us in reality that absolutely needs to be dealt with. Now, on a positive note, I'm referring to this full moon more collectively because we're about to get into a month in July that's more intense collectively, that's more active collectively. The global events, the global leadership, the technology on Earth, the Earth's environment and the resources on Earth, the economy. All of these are collective. We all share these things. We all get exposed to these things. So when I say that July is going to be more of like a collective month where the collective energies are more activated, more alive, more pronounced, that's what I'm talking about. And then we also have your own personal experience, and your personal experience is all about you as a creator, what you're here to experience, your life purpose, how you're consciously thinking, feeling, processing, and responding to your life, how you're aligning yourself and um, going through your journey, your healing journey, your growth journey, your enlightenment journey, your transformative journey, big changes, transitions. And this full moon offers us healing on a personal level. Maybe challenging, maybe a little bit messy or confusing, but it offers us real healing and it offers us the opportunity to heal and let go of those energies that would prevent us from receiving support from our soul's intelligence or our divine intelligence. Sometimes we hold on to soul level wounds or spiritual traumas where we get cut off from our own information or we get separated or we start to develop a relationship to our spirituality or to God or to our divinity or to our higher power that we are neglected, that we are alone, that we are being unsupported, that we are deprived on some level. There are real spiritual traumas where we disconnect ourselves from support, from receiving, from having, from being fulfilled with what we need and what we want and what we desire. And this is a full moon that helps us dissolve those wounds that are very invalidating to who we are as a creator, where we are not living in abundance or freedom or um, able to receive our abundance, but instead living our lives in a form of scarcity and living our lives in a form of deprivation with the bare minimum, barely surviving, barely things working. On a personal level, this full moon helps us start to release that energy because ultimately, on a foundational level, we are preparing to be supported. We are preparing to let go of the invalidation and the depletion and the exhaustion and the burnout around our foundations in our lives on a personal level, where we're not supported, where we need to build a supportive foundation. And we're clearing the way spiritually so that we can actually be open and receptive to our own abundance and our own support and the way that that comes in through our own spiritual intelligence. So there's quite a difference between the collective tone and what you may be experiencing personally, but what you're experiencing personally is a part of the greater awakening that allows this world to change and to build new foundations that actually support us on a survival level, on a first chakra level, in our everyday lifestyle, in our food, water, sleep, exercise, communities, the systems, all of that currently not supporting us, currently looking um, intimidating as far as all the problems that we see in the systems. But when we individually start to allow healing to occur in our system, our personal system, around receiving support and having support, even if that means opening up beyond your mind, not knowing how that's possible, not knowing how we do that within the current state of our systems. You just begin to allow that support to come in, and it does come in. It might come in ways that you possibly haven't been aware of before. But it starts with releasing those old stories, those old spiritual traumas that would block you from receiving support. And that's something that I notice happening spiritually around this full moon. So let's get into the actual full moon in Capricorn. My name's Michelle. Welcome to Realization Hub. I'm doing an energy update on the Capricorn full moon, but I also have a lot of other things to touch in on over the next 2 weeks. So there's a lot of shifts and changes that are happening astrologically from this full moon over the next 2 weeks before the new moon in Cancer. And so I'm going to be touching in on some of those things because they're really important, because right now they're kind of signaling lots of shifts and changes that are occurring in the month of July and starting on June 29th during this full moon. All right, so let's just start with this full moon. This full moon is happening on June 29th at 1:56 p.m. Hawaii time. And the moon is going to be in Capricorn in the first decan of Capricorn. So first of all, the moon, you can think about it as our feminine energy, as our fertility, as our body, as our subconscious patterns, our creativity, what helps us feel safe and secure, um, our nurturing ability. And when the moon is in Capricorn, it's in detriment, which means it's not very comfortable in this Capricorn energy. Kind of like if you went to go stay at an Airbnb that wasn't very comfortable for you. It's not that you can't experience the full range of what the moon offers. It's just that it takes a little bit extra work and awareness to make things um, work. Capricorn is a cardinal sign, which makes it a natural leader and manager of things. It's also an earth sign, which makes Capricorn super practical, reliable, committed, responsible, and hardworking. And it's a feminine sign, meaning that it responds to life, it's receptive. When we think about Capricorn, we're thinking about our long-term goals, our ambitious long-term goals. Having some form of achievement on the horizon, almost like climbing the summit of a mountain and what you want, your dream, what you're trying to achieve, the success you want in the world, the respect that you want in the world, the legacy that you want to leave behind in the world. Think of that as like the summit of a mountain. That's where you want to end up. But Capricorn is known for the sea goat that has to take one step at a time, climb up that mountain and get to the summit. And that just doesn't happen all at once. It happens over time. And so Capricorn is connected to time and our long-term goals and what happens over time and the steps that we have to take over time to achieve the results that we want. This is not an energy of short-term gratification. It's the energy of what you have achieved, what the results are based on the work that you have put into something. So this full moon is occurring, and the full moon you can think of as it can be like an ending. A full moon can be more like a release that we have, like an energetic or emotional release that we have. The full moon can also be like an illumination, like it illuminates something that maybe we weren't quite aware of before, something that was hidden that gets illuminated, it becomes clear. And a full moon can be like a turning point in our personal stories. Like something comes to fruition, something comes to culmination, and then we start to turn the corner and um, the story changes in some way, pivots in some way. So having the full moon in the first decan of Capricorn really emphasizes this Saturnian energy of Capricorn. And the Saturnian energy of Capricorn, you can think of as like a old teacher, like an old grandpa that teaches us. And this old grandpa energy is really helping us in the long term, but can feel critical, can feel kind of cold and harsh and dry and like lacking empathy. And, it's kind of that type of teacher. They're going to kick you in the butt so that you start working. and you start working and you're sitting there like, rubbing your butt because it hurts. And you really don't appreciate the way you got pushed into working hard, but you end up working anyways. And then, when you look back, you're kind of like, man, that experience kind of sucked, but look what I created. Look what I did. Look at what came into material. Look what I materialized. Look at what I embodied. Look at what um, I made. Look at the results of what I've done. It's worth it. So this full moon is emphasizing hard work. It's emphasizing responsibility and commitment and, doing the work and our karma and our legacy and what it takes to materialize our ambitions. And this full moon is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is currently in its fall, which means that Saturn is a planet of responsibility, delays, restriction, boundaries, commitment, hard work, our physical reality world. It even rules things like death and our mortality and time and things that take place over time. And it's in Aries. So it is in fall in Aries, which means that it has a hard time carrying out its energy in Aries. You can think of Aries as like a sprinter. It kind of gets things started, it does a quick sprint, and then it wants to rest. It's like a sprinter. Whereas Saturn is more like a marathon runner. And so when we have Saturn and Aries, what we get are these, hardships or things that occur where we have to both sprint and run a marathon. And what occurs is that we do end up taking a lot of action, but we're also at the risk of burnout. And we're needing to get things started, but we might not have like the foundation set yet. And so we're building things and putting structure to things that may lack a really solid foundation. And that's what makes Saturn and Aries kind of wonky and difficult to work with. It can also bring about like hot tempers, like quick hot tempers, like authoritarian energy, and just, Aries can be um, self-oriented, aware of the self, aware of what I want, what I need, who I am, my preferences, my desires. And so when you have Saturn there, that's kind of cranky and authoritarian, it can feel a little bit like one-sided, not quite fair and balanced like a Libra. So anyways, Saturn is the ruler of this full moon, and Saturn is going to be in a square with this full moon. And squares represent challenge. They represent two things that, two things that we need to integrate. It can represent action and growth. Like this full moon comes about, but this full moon is challenging in some way because we have to integrate, this watery energy of Cancer, this earthly energy of Capricorn, and this fiery energy of Aries. Essentially, we have to get something started. When we have a square and a full moon, like something's being initiated. Something's coming to fruition or culmination, and it needs to be initiated. And we need to manage it practically. We need to be aware of our emotional security, and we need to be connected to who we are um, and our leadership and our willingness to maybe do something new or get something started that hasn't been started before. Now, what this reminds me of when I start to look at this energy is kind of like if you needed to build a house and you found an area of like a forest in which you need to build a house. And it's great because you found the place that you're going to build the house. You're ready to build the house. And you have possibly, the tools that you need to build the house. But there's a caveat. And this caveat is that the weather's starting to change. It's kind of like the weather's starting to change, and instead of it being like springtime and summertime where you've got plenty of time to build a house before the winter comes, it's like you start to get that cold breeze. It's like winter is coming, and it's kind of like that feeling of like, I don't have enough time. Like, I don't have a lot of time. My time is limited. There's a restriction around time and the pressure is on. There's like a deadline, and we got to get this started. Like, we haven't started yet. It's a big project, and I'm the only one working on the house. So you get this experience of restriction. Like, I have restricted time, there's pressure, and by the way, I'm the only one that's doing it. I feel alone in this. I'm kind of overwhelmed. There's a lot to do and I have to get it all done before winter comes. And so that's kind of like the vibe of this full moon. It's not bad, it's not negative, it's just sobering. And it requires us to strategize because Saturn is in this conjunction with Pallas Athena and Vesta. Okay. And Pallas Athena is like the goddess of wisdom and war. And Vesta helps us connect with um, our sacred purpose. And so this full moon is highlighting something about our sacred purpose. Like, this is something we need to build. This is structure we need to create. This is commitment we need to make, or this is the work we need to do. These are the boundaries we need to embody. Like, it helps illuminate something about what we need to do over time. And it requires that we are wise about it and strategic about it, and that it is aligned with our purpose. And in that case, it's really good. However, we get that pressure, that challenge to take action because maybe there's like holes in our boundaries. Maybe we have porous boundaries, or maybe we notice something that's not quite working that needs to be, that we need to create structure around, or maybe there's a limitation on time and we feel the pressure of like a deadline looming. That's what makes it challenging. And so we have some supports around this full moon. We have a sextile to Uranus. Is in Gemini. And generally, what that indicates is that we can, we have the opportunity, like the opportunity is available for us to, innovate, like innovate, create solutions, be more creative, do things a little bit differently, change some things, pivot some things, become aware of our priorities and change things according to our priorities. This is a changeable energy, willing to change, willing to innovate, willing to create, willing to pivot, shift, do things necessary to support the structure that we're trying to build. So if you're building something, if you're creating something, maybe you're using a certain, technology to create structure around something. And based on that technology, you start to pivot your focus, your priorities, what you're creating, how you're creating it, things like that. Or it could be more like you had a plan. Maybe you had a plan, around something that you're building in your life, structure, things like that. And you realize, oh, I only have like this much time left to build this. And maybe the project was too big, or it's too overwhelming, or um, it's not realistic to get it all done before that deadline. So maybe you shift up your priorities and you start to focus on something simple, simple that you can create. Like in the example that I gave, let's say you're trying to build a house in the forest and you want to build like a two-story house or like a big house. And let's say winter is coming, and instead of building the whole house, you shift plans and you build like a little, one bedroom house, and decide that you're going to delay your plans and finish the rest of the house, later next year. So that's kind of like a possibility, like being willing to shift, being open to pivot. Like there's opportunities to create, to innovate, to shift, to pivot, to change things like on a foundational level. And that can be supportive around this time. And we also have a trine with a beautiful trine with Venus in Leo. And Venus is that planet of uniting things, bringing things together, harmony, balance, our pleasure, our desires, our money and finances. And so there can be a beautiful committed energy, relational energy, maybe cooperative energy that comes through around this full moon that supports what we're building or supports our boundaries or supports the structure or, comes in and supports us around, you know, um, around the circumstances that might feel more um, practical and realistic and sobering. There's like relational support that is here for us during this full moon. Now, this full moon is also in a square with Neptune. And this is where I'm seeing like kind of a healing happening, and on a personal level, like when I'm looking at the whole collective picture and I'm looking at where this full moon falls in place for us personally, what I'm seeing is that collectively we're about to go through a lot of change. Collectively, we're about to go through more waves of awakening, more waves of change, more waves of activism, more waves of kind of reckoning and like the ushering in of new society and new civilization. And we got to get out of our own way. And sometimes what's in our own way is our own wounds, our own spiritual wounds that cut us off from support. And that's kind of what I'm seeing here with this square to Neptune is that we're dissolving something during this full moon. This full moon is helping us release a spiritual wound. Now, the reason why I'm seeing a spiritual wound around being kind of deprived and being lacking of resources and kind of feeling alone and like we're lacking the foundations that we need and the support that we need. And that wound is getting in our way personally and collectively. Like we've got this sacred purpose. We're all here on the planet right now for a sacred purpose. Like if you are living on Earth right now, this is a historical time of massive change on Earth, and you're right in the middle of the story of it. And a part of what's getting in our way between like this old functioning of Earth and this new functioning of Earth is our wounds and where we have cut ourselves off from our own abundance, our own support on a spiritual level, receiving support spiritually, receiving support beyond our mind, beyond what's practical, beyond what we can imagine. Etheric support, our soul's intelligence, our creative intelligence, how that comes together for us beyond what we can comprehend, and us being open enough and trusting enough in order to receive that. And so I see this full moon as an important clearing that's occurring, that is both practical and weighty and sobering and realistic, but also helps us to release and dissolve something that is ultimately a form of interference around receiving support. Now, one of the things that's kind of showing me this is that the same day on June 29th, we have Mercury at 26 degrees in Cancer, and It's stationing retrograde. And it's going to be stationing retrograde. And over the next few weeks, it's going to be retrograde in Cancer. And it's going to turn direct in Cancer on June 23rd around 16 degrees. All right. But it's happening the same day as the full moon. So, first of all, when the full moon comes, the energies are louder. The energies are more exaggerated. It's everything can be felt more, especially if you're sensitive to energy. It's just things get more loud. It's like turning up the volume button. To have Mercury station retrograde on this full moon means that this day may feel messy and chaotic, especially on an emotional level, especially when it comes to our personal relationships, our friends, our family, people that are dear to us, people that we want to protect, matters that are important to us. This might be a day where you're more emotional, you might feel more sentimental, you might feel more messy, you might be crying. Um, things might go haywire with communication, with travel, with delays, with miscommunications, with conversations. So Mercury is going retrograde. It's stationing retrograde. But when it's stationing retrograde, it's in a square. And it's in a square with Chiron, the wounded healer, which is at 0 degrees in Taurus. It just moved into Taurus. And it's also in a square with Eris, the goddess of chaos and discord. Now, what this means is that this is a type of healing that's happening that is awakening us. It's awakening us to change. And if you think about these wounds that we hold spiritually, that deprive us, that keep us in a state of scarcity and deprivation and lacking support, well, that puts us in a vulnerable position on a collective level. When we are lacking what we need, our resources, we're more easily controlled. We're more easily dominated. We can be manipulated and we can be kind of puppeteered by higher levels of authority, higher levels of control that exist in society, right? And so when we have something that comes into our lives, like around this full moon, it's like a wound can get activated. A wound can get activated not for the purpose of making our lives miserable, but for the purpose of awakening us to something more, awakening us to change. Like activating this wound might be a little destabilizing, a little messy, a little disruptive, a little chaotic. But ultimately, it's helping us come into a sense of greater worth, of greater value, and where we can actually receive support around our foundations, around our financial security, around, you know, um, what we're creating and growing in our lives. And so having Mercury during the full moon, station retrograde in a square with Chiron, this could be a messy feeling kind of day. It could be one of those days where we like, you know, like have like like kind of a heavier feeling. Maybe a fear comes to the surface, or maybe there's like a heavy conversation, or maybe there's something sobering that occurs and it's activating. It pokes your wounds and you're crying, or you just feel emotionally kind of destabilized. And that's a part of the healing. That's a part of the healing. Once it's activated, it begins to dissolve. And that might be challenging because it might be emotional, it might be old, it might, be mentally foggy or emotionally foggy. But ultimately, that's us getting out of our own way. That's us saying this wound that we have is interfering with our foundations. It's interfering with our ability to receive support and abundance. It's interfering with our personal value and what we can receive. It's interfering with what we're growing and laying down. It's interfering with our money. And so this is some foundational healing. This is like first chakra healing. This is like, stuff that affects our body's health, our body's needs, our body's resources like food, healthy food, abundant amount of food, access to food, food that is organic and clean, water that is purified, having enough water available, sleep, rest. All of these things are necessities for our body. And there might be some real wounds around scarcity and being able to have what we need on a physical level collectively, right? And so we have this Mercury retrograde starting, and it's gonna be retrograding to 16 degrees, which means that the entire retrograde we are going to see it in this kind of wide square with Saturn, getting into a tighter square with Saturn before it turns direct. And so this retrograde in Cancer could be more internal. Well, it is going to be more internal because a retrograde is an internal energy. So for the next 3 weeks, on a practical level, it's important to recognize this is a time to be internal. This is a time to reprocess something. This is a time to review something, review the past, rethink something, redo something, rework something. It's okay if you have delays. It's okay if things get slowed down. It's okay if things are a little bit emotional or sentimental within you. It's a time to reflect. It's a time to think. It's a time to go within and be more internal. There might be something weighing on you with this square to Saturn. There might be responsibilities weighing on you, real things that you have to deal with in the physical world outside of you, like real hardships, real foundational issues, real things that you're contending with. Um, there could be thoughts, fears that you're working through. There could be, um, clashes with authority figures. I'm just naming some things that come up with Saturn. Like these are the things that could be on our minds, and us working through that kind of like on an internal level, kind of like in the background, internally, like energetically, psychically, emotionally. And it can bring up family stuff too. It can bring up like family wounds, family ancestral patterns, because Cancer is all about the family, the clan, the ancestry, the security around family and working through some of those ancestral patterns that show up emotionally, subconsciously, physically around our abundance. Like these are the things that could be reprocessing, during this retrograde. So I found that interesting that the full moon happens, then Mercury retrograde is happening the same day as the full moon. And at the same time, we have Jupiter in Cancer, okay, at 29 degrees. And at the same day, on the 29th, it shifts into Leo. Leo is a totally new energy. It's kind of like a shift in the way we relate to the outer world as a whole. It is like a shift in a broader perspective that we have. Okay. And so something around this full moon is kind of activating multiple things. And it's kind of like, whoa, we come to clarity, or something confusing happens, or something needs to be worked out. We get this kind of reality check. There's this deadline or this limitation of time or a restriction in resources or something. We get this kind of sobering clarity, and probably can bring up fears for some people. And then we have to rework something. And our perspective of something on a broader level shifts. Okay. And we have Jupiter shifting into Cancer. Now, Jupiter is shifting into Leo. Jupiter is currently in Cancer. It's exalted in Cancer. It's going to shift into Leo. Now, Leo is a sign of leadership, of our gifts and talents, and shining that into the world, being bold, expressing ourselves authentically. It's a fixed sign, so it's more stable and fixed in its direction. It's like a loyal energy. It can be showy, performative. There are shadow sides to Leo. There are beautiful qualities to Leo. Jupiter is moving into Leo. So it's going to bring about a lot of external and internal growth around this Leo energy in our charts. Around our authentic voice, how bold we can be when we speak, our leadership abilities, our relationship to leadership and authority, our own gifts and talents, and how we share that with the world, how other people orient around us. All of this is going to be going through an expansion and a growth process. But here's the thing, Jupiter will be approaching an opposition with Pluto in July. What I'm sensing is this is where the collective energy becomes more pronounced in July because we have Jupiter approaching um, this opposition with Pluto, and it starts to make something very obvious. If we think about Pluto right now, Pluto is in a trine with Uranus. And so we start to see all this technology occurring. Drones, AI. AI is starting to just spread. We also have issues with AI in our environment. It's there's a lot of controversy. There's no laws and regulation to like restrict AI and the way that it is having negative impacts on society and on the environment. And so right now we've got a situation of a fast expansion of technology. It's for better or worse affecting us on a societal level collectively. And then we have this opposition with Jupiter. Um, and this opposition is going to be in Leo. So let me just switch up the charts here for a moment. So Jupiter is going to be in Leo around July 20th. It's going to be in Leo in 4 degrees in an exact opposition with Pluto. And what is even so rare about this is that it creates this basket-looking configuration in the sky with outer planets. Now, there are mundane astrologers that have studied this. They've seen it coming for years. And they've predicted that this is a moment in society that ushers in the ending and the beginning of new civilization or new society, something along those lines. But this is an opposition. This creates tension. And this for sure will illuminate and expose and make it very obvious of the fears in society, the dark agenda of leaderships, dark leaderships, the issues of power and control with leaders and with the collective. It's going to make it very obvious. It's going to magnify it. It's going to expose it. Leadership is going to be exposed. We could see whistleblowing. We could see more exposing of, um, dark leadership, dark agendas, like, things where technology could be invading our privacy or controlling us, or starting to do things that are more um, malefic in nature. And this is kind of the friction that creates the movement and the opportunity to change, to create, to expose, to purge, to create boundaries, new law, new structure, and to ultimately release old leadership and usher in new forms of leadership, new forms of structure, new forms of law or order around technology. I'm just going to add the nodes here because during July, leading up to July 20th, we're all going to be feeling this opposition. This energy is going to be very present for the whole month of July into August, I believe. And so these are historical things that are occurring in the month of July. The friction that activates the change, the friction that activates the release, the friction that activates the crisis or the movement or the exposure that's needed so that things start to change, so that things start to move in a different direction, in a new direction. And we're going to have this opposition with the north node and the south node at 0 degrees. And then, later um, in the month, around the last week of July-ish, we're going to have the nodes finally shifting into Aquarius and Leo. And so when we have um, Jupiter in Leo, kind of putting us into some growth periods around leadership, and then we have the South Node in Leo, what we're probably going to see is more of an orientation towards collective expansion and releasing old forms of leadership and using leadership in ways for the higher good of the collective. Whenever you have the South Node here, it's karmic and it's going to act like a trash can, like a psychic trash can, and it's going to be draining out all the old kind of shadow-like sides of Leo that don't serve us anymore. And so when we look at leadership, we have a positive side to leadership, which can be enthusiastic and inspiring and um, where someone has gifts and talents that are helping others. And then we have a shadow side to leadership that is fake and performative and sparkly and, you know, um, cheap and just kind of fabricated, right? And so having the South Node starting to transit through Leo while Jupiter is putting us through growth and expansion around Leo, we have to be wise with this Leo energy. We don't get away with using it in unwise way. The more wise we are with this Leo energy, the more we, can collect all the blessings and abundance and opportunities that come with it. But we're definitely going to be expanding on the way we relate to the world, in forms of leadership, our perspective of the world in forms of leadership, and, you know, using leadership for a higher purpose, for a purpose that helps the collective. And so we might start to see a turning point. We have a pretty intense full moon at the end of July. It's going to be close to Pluto, opposing Jupiter. So this full moon at the end of July, like really activates this energy of that basket, in the sky. Like things are going to be very obvious around that full moon. So we're entering into some historical territory. Now, I want to get back to where we are right now because there is a transit coming up that I do want to talk about, and it's around July 3rd and 4th, which is Independence Day in the United States. We have Mars conjuncting Uranus. On a collective level, this could be this can bring about volatile energy, explosive energy, anything from, explosions, attacks, to protests, to um, accidents. It can be kind of like an energy to be very careful around. So just if you're in the public, around July 3rd, July 4th, definitely practice precaution. Expect the unexpected. For us on a personal level, you can think about Mars as our masculine energy, how we're directing our energy, and when it conjuncts with Uranus, there can be like a shift in our energy levels, a shift in what we're focusing our energy on, um, a change in direction, or even it could be something like we get like a download or we get an insight, because Uranus is awakening and it's the higher mind. We might get a download or an insight, and this could kind of change the trajectory that we were currently on. We could actually go through an ascension-like experience with our masculine energy around this time. So I just want to throw that out there. Those few days around July 3rd and 4th, that's a good time to be kind of more self-aware, slow down, um, don't do anything dangerous. It's a time to practice precaution, um, to be grounded, and to be very aware of what you're doing in the public because it could be kind of unhinged or chaotic on a collective level during this time. All right, back to this full moon. Let's wrap it up with some wisdom, with some practical things that we can do. First of all, it's a full moon in Capricorn, so it's time you know, to approach things practically. Whatever comes up around the full moon, even though it can be triggering for us emotionally, we still have to take action and initiate something practically. So think about practical application. Think about how you can manage something. Think about structure that you need and strategy that you need to build the structure that you need in your life. Be willing around this full moon to slow down. There is a Mercury retrograde and Jupiter is shifting into Leo. And the moon is squaring Saturn. So we might feel very restricted this day. We might, it could feel like a lot of different currents that are going in a lot of different directions, and it could be exhausting. It could be energetically exhausting to try to push things forward in your life and move things forward really fast when everything's slowing down and everything's getting restricted around the full moon, right? So don't try to push things forward. Don't try to pressure yourself to make everything happen immediately. Be willing to kind of go at the rate of nature. Like, be willing to slow down, embrace delays, go within, um, be more internal. Really, when it comes to Mercury retrograde, double check your communication, double check your texts, your emails, your phone calls, your messages, things like that. Allow extra time if you're going to be traveling, allow extra time around this Mercury retrograde because there could be delays, things that get canceled, reschedules, things like that. So on a practical level, embrace the slowness that's occurring and tune into your desires, tune into your gifts and talents, tune into how you want to share that with others, tune into commitment with others, the collaboration with others, how that can support you. Try to stay open to your healing and this struggle that could be occurring, um, for a lot of people around feeling lack, feeling scarcity, feeling alone, feeling isolated, feeling the lack of support. And just recognize that there is support out there. We have each other and we can show up and be more bold about what we want, what we need, how we want to connect with others. Um, we can embrace kind of that Venus energy. We can embrace change. We can embrace the higher mind, any insights that come in, any creative insights that come in. These are the things that support us. And as we're allowing these kind of spiritual activations to occur, and again, these spiritual activations are helping us personally receive more, personally come into more of our abundance and support, but collectively ushering in new society, ushering in change, ushering in the activations that are necessary to take it from where it is right now, corrupt, things in the system not working, porous boundaries, all of that stuff, to creating more structure, creating more boundaries, inviting new leadership in, doing things that are best for the collective, doing things that are best for the earth, things like that. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. That was a lot, but there is a lot happening astrologically. So July is going to be one of those months where there could be a lot of different things going on that we feel collectively, maybe even personally, depending on how these planets are transiting your personal chart. So if you're interested in getting a natal chart reading, I go over your natal placements as well as current transits. You can find more information in the description box below if you want to book a reading. Um, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you can be notified anytime I upload a new video. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please follow the podcast, give it a rating, and write me a comment. Let me know how you're doing. Give me a big psychic hug. Okay, it was so good to see you. Take care, everyone. Bye.